Yeah. 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 Okay.
Hello and welcome to Afrospace with me, Adetunji Omotala. Afrospace is an online weekly station on YouTube, and we promote African stories. We tell African stories from an African perspective. And joining me today to come and help us unpack some of the issues around child protection, South Africa, and the rest of the continent is Mayke Huijbregts. And Mayke is the Chief Child Protection Director in South Africa, and she's also involved. She's the Chief for Social Policy. Welcome to Afrospace, Mayke.
Thank you so much, Adetunji, for having me this afternoon.
You're very welcome, and Happy New Year to you. And I wish you a wonderful 2022.
Thank you so much. And the same to you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mayke, I mean, look, according to a reputable Optimum study, 1 in 4 children experiences some form of maltreatment, physical, serial, emotional, or neglect during the childhood. Before we unpack all of this in the questions, it will be good to give our viewers a sense of your expertise in the area of child protection. I mean, you have got more than 25 years experience in this area, and you have 20 years program management and strategic leadership experience in human rights and child rights. In fact, you consider yourself as a technical specialist in social policy, as well as social protection and humanitarian assistance. So with those words and with that short introduction, I'll take you to my first question. Now, Mayke, kindly share with us the UNICEF perspective on child protection, what that entails, and the key issues.
Yes, thank you so much, Adetunji. So child protection is being defined in UNICEF as prevention and response to violence, abuse, neglect, and exploitation of all children at all times. And we see that in its overall context of what has to happen to make sure that every child can grow up in a nurturing environment where he or she is safe at all times, but also ultimately develop to his or her fullest potential. So we look at child protection holistically from what are the underlying causes that leads to a child to be at risk of his or her rights to become violated. How do we need to address underlying causes, but then also make sure that in case a child gets hurt, abused, neglected, or abandoned, what then needs to happen in order to make sure that the child gets legal support and medical support and that justice is being done. So that means for South Africa in particular that the Optimus survey that you refer to is stating that 1 out of 3 children in South Africa are experiencing a form of abuse before the age of 18.
Now, Mayke, can you give us, you are a child protection policy director at UNICEF, and you've got broad experience, deep experience across countries on a Pan-African basis. Can you give us a sense of aspects of your work that are most challenging and those that are, less challenging, or in fact, what you find rewarding?
Thank you so much. What is very important is to understand the situation of children at all times and to look at all the elements of children's holistic well-being as to understand what the child protection risks are that children face. So what is challenging is that in South Africa, so many children still live below the poverty line, and that the families have become quite dysfunctional as a cornerstone of society. And that's the first point of call of creating a nurturing environment. So what then remains challenging is to ensure that everybody who is a responsible duty bearer knows and has the capacity to create that nurturing environment for children and takes his or her responsibility in either providing a nurturing care environment at the family level or as a social worker or as a police person or as a teacher, fulfill their duties towards that same child at the same time. As children's rights are to grow up in a family environment, but to be safe at all times, either at school or in the community on the way to school or in an after-school program. So it is challenging to make sure that all actors are capacitated at the same level, empowered with knowledge, take their accountability and responsibility towards that child, and work well together. So that is challenging and at the same time an opportunity. So what I have really enjoyed a lot in South Africa is, of course, all the examples that South Africa brings to the continent, starting with the child support grant. So South Africa is blessed with the provision of the child support grant to up to 13 million children.
Now, you've been working, Mayke, in South Africa for a number of years. Give our viewers a sense of what your sojourn has been like and what are the key achievements that you've made during your stay.
What we have done over the last years is to really look at the holistic framework of social policy, social protection, child rights, and child protection, and work with a variety of partners in support of the Department of Social Development and Education subs, as well as with the Presidency, Parliament, South African Human Rights Commission, civil society, academic institutions, to understand how we can support government to maximize the investment on children through the grants for the well-being of children.
Now, can you give us a sense, Mayke, about the UNICEF's global child protection strategy? How does that differ from the 2008 strategy, particularly around the issue of public finance for children?
So we have a new strategic plan for child protection, and that was endorsed recently by the executive board. The importance of that plan is, of course, everything is around acceleration against the SDGs, as children are still lagging behind and they have really fallen behind as a result of the global pandemic and the impacts thereof with the school closures and the fear that and anxiety that has brought with it, but we also saw intensified violence. So the new strategic plan is looking at integrated approaches towards accelerating results pertaining to protecting every child with mental health support services, psychosocial support, adolescent empowerment programs, support to victims of violence with access to judiciary, make sure that every child is registered, but better collaboration between child protection, social protection, education, and health to accelerate integrated approaches towards the overall well-being of children, and not only look at that protection piece or only at that education piece. So that is the difference of the strategic plan at this moment in time, is to really accelerate all these initiatives at all levels. Also to look at a component of online protection, as more and more the whole world is working virtually and children are on their devices at the minimum 6 hours a day. So they definitely need to be protected online, which is a new component of our work. And in terms of financing for children, so public finance for children is relevant for all areas of work pertaining to children, be it education, health, nutrition, water, sanitation, social protection. In terms of child protection, the good thing is that it starts to understand we need to accelerate investments, not only in social services, but really in violence prevention and early intervention services, and that need to be adequately costed and budgeted for through the state budget, but compounded with private sector resources for family strengthening parenting programs, as well as for safe books.
Okay. Now, the UNICEF blog, your blog, contains an article that is dated just a few days ago, in this month, dated just a few days ago, 10th of January. Now, it describes the obstacles facing, for example, Ghana's 5 million adolescent girls. The blog talks about that this old situation, that it creates anemia, which affects about, in fact, Anemia affects about almost 50% of these girls, and more than half of those girls do not complete secondary school. They're involved in child marriages and adolescent pregnancies, and it's become a reality for at least 1 in 5 of those girls. So what, in your view, is UNICEF doing or planning to do about this kind of grave situations around the continent? In this specific case, we refer to Ghana.
Thank you so much. So what is very important that is a picture of a very particular vulnerable girl child that is exposed to school dropout, early marriage, as well as then becoming pregnant at an early age. So it is very important that we understand what is the root cause that leads to this child to drop out of school, married out early, and therefore becoming pregnant also as a result of that. So what we are doing in this situation, from the top down to different countries, including Ghana, is really look at how can we make sure that we keep girls in school by working with the parents in creating awareness on child marriage, and that you do by starting with the legal system to outlaw child marriage, make sure that's well understood amongst traditional leaders, chiefs, that child marriage is illegal, that it's outlawed, and that there is law enforcement to practice that. But that you find champions in the community who stand up for these girls and say no to child marriage, and that every village is replicating the leadership of one champion to another. So it's important to address harmful cultural practices and negative social norms at all times with all members of a community and hold people accountable to doing so. The awareness can be created through the schools, empowering the girls themselves first and foremost on sexual reproductive health and rights, but then to create awareness with the teachers and the community leaders around the child marriage and avoid teenage pregnancies, to also ensure there is an element of social protection so that parents don't feel inclined to have to marry off the girl child in order to get an income. So there's a combination from social protection, sexual reproductive health and rights, training of girls themselves, as well as awareness on child marriage as to avoid this from escalating and to further go to scale.
Okay, finally, Mayke, there are lots of grave violations of children, especially in protracted and new conflicts. According to a recent warning, this warning was again by UNICEF on 31st of December 2021. The warning stated that in the last week of 2021, at least 4 children were among the 35 that were killed in Kaya State in eastern Myanmar. Now, how can you, in your view, how can UNICEF prevent such violations and deaths of children in conflict situations? What can UNICEF do today that will be visible, that will have the impact to reduce this terrible numbers of young children who have been mowed down around the world?
Thank you so much. These are terrible atrocities that should never occur. And what we do is, looking back at the early point in the interview, is the importance to completely monitor the situation of children at all times and understand where crisis hurts are or might occur and who the partners are involved in creating such, be it the government, be it terrorist groups, be it other kind of groups that that have negative endeavors at hand, and then negotiate. UNICEF negotiates around the world with governments at all levels, either from the top, from New York, directly through a country representative or a child protection team, but also with warring factions as to advocate that every child has the right to be safe at all times and that they should be excluded from any form of conflict. So as an advocate, we have to play that role. However, we are not a sovereign government, neither a particular other group. So we can't then intervene at that time. We can just negotiate, advocate, and make sure that we create child-friendly spaces for children affected by conflict or flight or migration, and that then children get the adequate support. So we do what we can more in the negotiation space and as to create the systems to create a protective environment. And when these levels of violence occur, we have to condemn it, as to make sure that there is zero tolerance to violence against children and women at all times, and that they're excluded from conflict. However, it's not always in our hands, and we continue to do our best as global child rights advocates.
Thank you very much, Mayke Huijbregts, Child Protection Director for UNICEF and also for Social Policy. Thank you for coming to share insights with us on the work, the sterling work that you're doing at UNICEF and also the organization, especially in the area of protection of children, which is a very important part of the ecosystem of the global compact that we have. We thank you very much for coming. And from my side, Adetunji, I'll be saying, Odabo, Segobe, Kachifo.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Muitíssimo obrigada.